Adults who experience trauma in their childhoods often struggle to understand why they're still troubled by those memories today. In this video, I'll be sharing 5 reasons why it makes sense to be haunted by traumatic childhood memories years or even decades later. Hi folks, I'm Will Bratt from Heart and Oak Therapy, supporting better, brighter lives. We're therapists who do regular videos on mental wellness and give practical ideas and tips to make your life happier and more fulfilling. So hit the subscribe button to keep in the loop. One of the most common questions I receive from adults who are struggling to heal from traumatic childhood experiences is, why can't I just get over it? The scope of this question is huge, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer. In this video, I draw out why adults are haunted by childhood trauma with a special focus on meaning and context. So first, I think it's probably important that we get on the same page in terms of what we're talking about when we're talking about trauma. Trauma is a word that can be used in so many different ways. People use it to refer to experiences that are challenging, scary, embarrassing, overwhelming, or shocking. When it comes to the world of therapy, trauma generally refers to experiences that are emotionally overwhelming, profoundly distressing, and deeply upsetting. This can look like experiences of violence and abuse, brushes with death, moral injuries, deep humiliation, or horrific disasters. No single experience is essentially or necessarily traumatic on its own. We can't just say, being held hostage in a bank robbery is a traumatic experience, or if you're assaulted by a stranger on the street, you will be traumatized. Two people could very easily survive a mugging or a robbery side by side and both agree that it's distressing, but it could happen that only one of those two people walks away feeling traumatized. The meaning that each person holds around the event is the key to whether or not they deem it traumatic. Now I'm going to share 5 hallmarks of childhood trauma that have a lot to do with why traumatic childhood experiences can trouble us well into adulthood. The first is violence and abuse. A shortcoming of the word trauma is that it's ambiguous and general. The reality is that childhood trauma usually consists of experiences of interpersonal violence or abuse. These experiences are of a very different nature than, say, a natural disaster or a car accident, which can also be described as traumatic. As my mentors Linda Coates and Alan Wade emphasize, violence is, by definition, deliberate. The fact that somebody made the choice to do harm to a child can, and should, be terribly upsetting. The second reason is that traumatic childhood experiences are rarely isolated events. One way that the term traumatic experience can be misleading is that it can give the false impression that the experience was an isolated instance. While that can be true of some people's traumatic childhood experiences, more often it's violence or abuse or mistreatment that takes place across time. When we reach adulthood, the trauma responses that we have to our traumatic experiences are more often in relation to the conditions that perpetuated the suffering, as opposed to the singular moments in time. This brings us to the third hallmark of childhood trauma, violations of social contracts. Abuse against children is typically carried out by people who should be in caring roles. Parents, foster parents, other family members, teachers, coaches, or clergy are socially sanctioned to provide safety and nurturance to children. Abuse is often perpetrated by those exploiting the privilege that comes with those positions. Going back to the issue of meaning, this can make abuse by these kinds of people all the more upsetting in the long term because it's done by people who should have been especially trustworthy and safe. The social responses that a child receives when experiencing a violence or abuse, or when seeking help, are another factor that can have a lot to do with why someone might deem a childhood experience to be traumatic. Because children largely depend on adults for safety and protection, when it's not provided, or when that safety is compromised further by an adult's response, it can be profoundly distressing. This can look a whole number of different ways, including when an adult knows that a child is in danger but does nothing to make it stop, when an adult punishes a child for coming forward and seeking help, when an adult on the periphery facilitates the violence, or when a child comes forward and is disbelieved or shamed. Understandably, negative social responses like these can be just as upsetting or even more so than the initial abuse or mistreatment itself. Finally, number 5 is the inability to make it stop. I firmly believe that whenever there is violence, there is resistance. Children are no exception to this, and in fact, they're often the cleverest resistors and safety makers around. People of any age who experience violence or abuse know that offenders make efforts to suppress resistance, which is why it usually flies under the radar or can be mistaken for things other than what it is, such as going along with the abuse. Despite the presence and prevalence of children's resistance, it's rarely strong enough to absolutely stop violence, abuse, or mistreatment from happening altogether. Being unable to stop bad things from happening can leave us feeling profoundly upset, which can haunt us well into childhood. Phrases like unresolved childhood trauma can feel unwieldy and overwhelming. When people throw phrases like these around, they basically just mean hurts from the past that haven't been made okay. In some cases, making things okay is a really tall order, but it's very unlikely that it's an impossible feat. Exploring and understanding the meaning that you hold around childhood trauma can help expose tangible avenues to pursue healing. This is one way that therapy can be especially helpful. While traumatic childhood experiences can haunt us well into adulthood, they can also be taken care of in beautiful ways that honor our dignity and support us in growth and healing. So now I'd like to turn it over to you, the Heart Note community. Are there other reasons that I didn't mention in this video that might make it hard for adults to shake traumatic childhood experiences? Are there things that you know about that can help toward feeling more at peace with childhood trauma? Make sure to let us know in the comment section. If this video has been interesting or helpful, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button below. For more helpful videos related to therapy and mental wellness, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell notification icon to make sure you stay in the loop. Take care until next time, and keep doing the things that help you live a better, brighter life.